CardGamesTV1 Podcast, mastering Ultra Instinct in card games. Ironically, this is something that I do in a lot of card games. Ironically, it's an aspect of deck building. As a deck builder, you try to build a deck, ideally, that's designed so whoever plays it it can play without thinking. Like, they just play the cards and the deck does what it's supposed to do, right? So as long as you play the cards, the outcome should result, right? Especially, if you're a deck builder, you build the deck to have an outcome. I use Beerus as an example. So of course you want 16 energy, so you can use this effect to win, right? Simple. So then, as a deck builder, you got to build a deck to be able to accomplish that goal. So you got to find cards that can help you, obviously, ramp, figure out how many copies you're going to need. Typically, you max out on the key cards that will help you get the most for your strategy. So of course, when you build a deck, you build it first and foremost with what you need. First and foremost is a win con, a strategy, the purpose of the deck, right? Like with Beerus, it would be the whole 16 energy win con thing. So you'll pick the leader and you'll pick the strategy, of course, to ramp, to pull that off. So then you have to think, okay, ramping is one thing, but if all you're doing is focusing on just ramping, then that means you're not really attacking, and you're not really defending. So then you have to take that to account. So then you have to look at defense as a form of ramp, right? So you want to incorporate defense in ramp, right? So for example, we have this Android 21 card. It's a Z battle card that has the ability to ramp an energy. So it's like a Whis. It's like a 4-drop Whis. So you can charge up an energy. And she is a blocker. So that's the added benefit. So now not only can you ramp, you can also still defend. So it increases your chances of getting that extra turn. And that extra turn means extra energy, right? Because you're going to charge energy every turn. So every turn you get is another energy you'll have, on top of whatever effects you're using to play an extra energy, right? So you have to take your turns and whatever effects you're using to charge energy to account, and then that will add up to all the energies. The point is, that I'm trying to get ahead, is you want to make sure that everything you're doing is pre-planned, right? So that way you don't have to think about it and try to figure it out and whatnot later on, right? You want to do all the thinking before you even play the game, right? And that's an aspect of deck building is, right? You think of what you want to do with the deck, then you build the deck, but then you got to test it, make sure that it works out the way you want. Make sure you have you draw the cards when you need it, and the list goes on, right? So that's where play testing comes in, so that we can make sure that the deck does ideally what you want it to do, and that's important. I notice a lot of players have a habit of having something in their deck that they could use, but a lot of times they end up not using it, and that's because the deck is not streamlined to make sure that they can use it. So, like, a lot of people will win without the win con. Nothing wrong with that. A win is a win, right? But if the purpose was to win with your leader effect, for example, then you need to make sure you can pull that off. The only reason you couldn't pull it off is if your opponent stopped you. That makes sense, right? That's an outside variable. That's an outside factor that can change it. But it shouldn't be an inside factor. Your deck shouldn't be built poorly that it can't succeed in getting you 16 energy. It should be able to get you 16 energy, right? You should be able to do the math, as it were, right? And add it up. Every turn, every play you make should add up to the 16 energies. So if your deck isn't designed to, add up to 16 energy, well, you're not going to get that 16 energy win con, right? So that defeats the idea of using a leader if you're not going to succeed in its win condition. I mean, there could be other reasons why you would play the leader. Maybe you want to trick people to thinking that's the way you plan to win, but your goal is really just to win with turning the tide or something. It's like, all right, or some other win con. If I'm right, yeah, there's the MISCS 12 drop MISCS. So maybe that's really your goal. You want people to be distracted and think that you're going for the leader's win con, but in reality, you're trying to go for MISCS. And MISCS, you need a Beerus leader in order to get its effect. So that is why that's the main reason you're using it, is to get that effect off. So I get it, some mind game type stuff. Nothing wrong with that, right? Strategy is a strategy. But what I'm, trying to put out there is the idea that like in the anime, the whole idea of Ultra Instinct is action without thought, right? Autonomous action. So you're not thinking your moves and plays, you're just playing them, right? You're not thinking of, how much damage you're going to do and whatnot. You're just doing it. This is why, that's essentially my play style, where it's like everything is already predetermined. My turn 1 is predetermined, my turn 2 is predetermined, and so on and so forth. I don't have to think that much when I'm playing. The only time that there's some thinking involved is when it comes to my energy. But even when it comes to charging my energy, even that's a little predetermined, right? Because again, it goes back to the deck building. I make sure that I have a certain ratio of cards in my deck, so that way, I know what to charge. The most typical rule of thumb when it comes to charging energy is, you want to charge any extra copies of a card, right? That requires less thinking. You just charge an extra copy of something. You don't want to charge a card you only have one copy of in your hand. You definitely don't want to charge a card you only have one copy in your deck, period. Like an ultimate or something. You don't want to charge your baby hatchet, for example, right? You don't want to charge your SCR. You got to keep your SCR. Charge anything else, right? So that's a rule of thumb. Just charge an extra card. Speaking of that, charge extra cards in unisons, right? They tend to not have combo power, so they would typically be stuff you'll want to charge. And you want to keep battle cards in your hands because they tend to have combo power, and you might need it, right? So that's another thoughtless, rule of thumb, as they say, right? So it's just having these philosophies, these ideas, that's where experience and knowledge and skill come in. That's why we talk about being skillful, right? Being good at the game is you already understand these concepts and principles before you even play the game, before you even play against a certain opponent, a certain deck. Too many people are obsessed with the idea of like, matchup. Oh, if my opponent's playing these types of cards, I gotta have these types of cards. If my opponent's playing this strategy, I gotta have a strategy to counter. It's like, yeah, I get it, but at the same time, you really don't. You need, the way I do things is again, trying not to think, right? I simplify things. I'm like, I make sure that I have a strategy that's, the goal is as long as I play the cards, I should get the outcome that I want, because I predetermine an outcome, right? A strategy to win con. And everything else I do while I'm playing, depending on how what my opponent does, I react accordingly. Now, sometimes I do incorporate tech cards. That's something we as players tend to do. We like to have tech cards to help us against certain matchups. I tend to prefer, since I don't do the side deck thing, I tend to prefer cards that are inherently good, generically good, that can be used against certain matchups, but in general are good in general. So basically multi-purpose. I prefer to use cards that in general are useful. Like in my Hatchiac, right now I'm not using it, but I typically use the 4-star ball along with Kid Goku, the 1-drop, in order to recycle the 4-star ball so I can keep using it essentially as combo power so I can combo defensively, right? So I mainly do that. But because I want to use Z battle cards, that strategy is not that useful in that regard, since you can't use the 4-star ball as, for the whole Z battle energy thing, Z energy. So obviously I'm going to have to use something different. So not using that strategy at the moment. Still a good, endless combo strategy, right? But I don't need it as much. Since I'm trying to get Z energy, I will combo. So defensively, blocking, negating, or out comboing, right? So I can get the Z energy, and that's it. And of course, I'm going to have draw effects. Draw with the leader, draw with some unisons, draw some battle cards, that kind of stuff. So that way I can make sure that I have enough cards in my hands to defend myself with, as well as to feed into the Z energy so I can bring out a Z battle card. And ideally, I want to bring out a blocker with the Z energy, so that way I can use it to defend myself, right? Keep my defenses up. And that's the other thing, right, is defense. In general, you should always be defensive, unless you really, really like going aggro and just attack, and have no defense. Good luck with that strategy. But realistically, from experience, it is better to always keep your defenses up, right? Keep your guard up, as they say, just like in a real fight. So you want to keep your guard up, right? You want to make sure you can dip dodge all your opponent's attacks. And the best type of defense is the floodgate effect. So stuff like Oceanus, Topo, Flying Nimbus, Violent Rays, all that good stuff. It's stuff to look into, right? Obviously play and keep your defenses up. Keeping energy up is good in a couple ways, because you can use it to obviously pay for your negates, but it could also just be a deterrent. If your opponent sees energy that you're not tapping out, then that gives them the impression that you have negates. Even if you don't have negates, make them think you do. It's better to have them think you have negates and they try to outplay that, or they hesitate because of it, than for you to make it obvious that you're defenseless. The idea is just don't be defenseless, right? And that's part of the coolness of like when we see Goku do his Ultra Instinct thing, right? Is that he's dip dodging. He's always one step ahead of his opponent. So he moves before his opponent moves, right? And that's the kind of thing you want to keep in mind. That you want to be able to plan how much damage you will and will not take. Especially the thing is, if you tap out, like let's say turn 3, pay 3 energy to play something, you better be ready to take a hit or two. You have to determine how much damage you are willing to take by doing so. And if you can't afford it, let's say you have 2 life, right, and you tap out, you're taking a big risk there. There's a possibility you might lose. Granted, we don't have Champa and Supreme Kai right now, so that kind of saves you if your opponent playing a deck that doesn't have a lot of double strike in it. But they always could have something that has a double strike. They always could overwhelm, right, and have an extra attack that could get through, right, through your defense. So, or lack of, since you tapped out, right? So the main thing is, here's the thing. If you still have negates in your hand, still have, like let's say you have Oceanus or something, if you still have that in your hand, don't tap out, right? Even if you want to do something cool, or you want to board wipe your opponent, want to play something to board wipe your opponent, if you still have a negate like Oceanus, Topo, stuff like that, if you still have them, use them first. Right, use up your defense before you start trying to go on the offensive and try to go on the proactive route, right? Because the thing about Ocean Instinct is, yes, it's moving before somebody else moves, but it's only in the concept of you're moving before they move because they're going to move, right? They're going to make a move. They're going to do something, so you're doing it before. You're reacting to it before it actually happens. You're not waiting for it to happen and then react. You're not waiting for somebody to throw a punch and then react to it. You're going to move and then they throw the punch, right? Because they had the thought to throw the punch. Their body is started the function to throw the punch, but you moved out the way, and then because they were already in the thought process of throwing the punch, they're going to still do it anyway. Even though you moved a couple seconds before they made the move, it's already too late. They're already in the process of resolving their action, as it were. So that's the thing. You want to, not only do you want to spend less time thinking when you're making your plays and playing the game, because one, by already knowing what to do before you got to do it, it allows you to pay attention to your opponent more. It will help you reduce, the possibility of them cheating or accidentally making a illegal play and so forth and so forth. Because, that's the thing. Too many people tend to focus on what they're doing and they never notice what their opponent doing. And a lot of times that can cost you a game because you're not paying attention. Right? I get it. It's hard to be in two places at once, right? It's hard to pay attention to what you're doing and what your opponent's doing, which is why you need to not be paying attention and focusing heavily on what you're doing. Your focus should be on your opponent, right? So pay attention to their board, right? Pay attention to their energy. Their energy is a mirror of their hand. That's another thing. So keep that in mind. That reduces your need to guess and try to figure out and try to memorize. It's like, I've seen this deck before. I think I saw a deck profile of it. What is in the deck? You don't need to memorize somebody's deck list, right? You could just look at their energy, and that already pretty much tells you what's in their hand, or at least what's in their deck. Just like looking at their drop gives you an indication of how many copies of their super combos they have left, and the list goes on, right? Basic, information that most of the players should already know. But if you don't know, now you know, right? And knowing's half the battle. Just like knowing how to play your cards by heart, right? Or by instinct is, half the battle. And that's the whole idea. That's what I'm trying to point out, trying to get y'all to think, is to not think, right? To think before you play, so that way when you're playing, you're not thinking. You're acting or reacting, right? Something, a little so-called pro tip, right? Little pro tip. Most people, especially when you go play competitively, especially when it's competitive. When it's casual, it's more relaxed. You tend to be less nervous, right? Less of an overthinker, right? But when you're playing competitively, you tend to get more nervous. You tend to be more of an overthinker, right? So you tend to be too cautious. And sometimes being too cautious, being an overthinker, can literally cost you the game. So the idea is to not think, to not stress yourself out, to not focus too heavily on what you're doing and not doing. And of course, I tested this out, tried this out myself, and it is true. I played better when. So, from my own personal experience of playing, casually, like on Untap and whatnot, right? But, also playing, at an event, how important it is to not be nervous, to focus. And I've seen some of my opponents, when they're playing against me, the level of nervousness they have, which is bad for them, of course. They should be more relaxed and, enjoying the game and, making sure that they play their cards and they know their strategy and they, succeed in winning, right? But they tend to be a little bit nervous, distracted. But that benefits me, of course, because I'm cool, calm, collective. and I'm just focusing on what I can and can't do, right? In the game, it's like, all right, I got my turn 4 play, okay, cool. I got my turn 3 play, all right. Just play the plays, activate the effects, do what I do, block what needs to be blocked, attack the leader, which is all I really want to do, is just keep attacking my opponent's leader. That's my basic game plan. I just keep attacking the leader and chip away at their life. And then, of course, just perform my win con, whatever it is. Whatever will reduce their life to 0, or win through mill, or win in time because I have more life than them. So that kind of stuff. So it's not too hard to, play the game. I always notice a lot of people have a habit of trying to give the idea, the impression that the game is hard and is difficult. And it takes a lot more skill. It's like, it doesn't take a lot of skill. It does take skill, as in your reading comprehension skills, right? Your mathematical skills, right? Practice, like, shuffling, drawing, charging, that kind of stuff. Like those aspects of the game, right? Understanding the basics of the game, understanding certain rules, like the ruling of certain interactions, of card interactions. That's important. Like that kind of skill, right? Memorize, especially if you have a specific combo, memorizing the combo, things of that nature. And that's why it's very important to not be so nervous, right? And not to overthink, because that's going to make you not focus on what you know that you know, and you know how to do your combo and whatnot. I remember playing a game at my locals, and I had my Summon Great deck. It's a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and I forgot how to play it, but I do have videos of the combos of the deck on my channel, but I couldn't get cell reception where I was at because the tournament area was in the basement area of the shop, so I couldn't get no cell reception, so I couldn't go watch my own videos on how to perform the combos for the deck, which I should have been watched, considering the fact that I already knew I was going to play the Summon Great deck, because I couldn't find my actual tournament deck. Couldn't find my deck. After the tournament, I did find it. It's like, oh, there it is. I was like, that's bullshit. That's the deck I wanted to play. That's the deck I know how to play by memory. So that was an unfortunate scenario. I would have done better at the event if I actually memorized and remembered how to play the deck. So that was that's what happens when you don't prepare, right? You don't make sure you find the right deck, make sure you have the deck that you're going to actually play and know how to play it before you actually go. So don't randomly grab a deck out of convenience and then hope you can do okay with it, especially if you haven't played with the deck in such a long time. Eventually I did memorize the combos and started winning, but it was already too late. There was only 4 rounds, and by the time I started winning, it was already round 3. We were going to round 4, and they already there wasn't that many people playing anyway, so it just ended up being just 3 rounds. It's like, I don't get an extra round. I don't get to play round 4. They're already going to play the final, so the round 4 is just for the top 8 and whatnot. It's like, oh, and I didn't make it. So it was a little too late for me. Like when I finally remembered how to play the deck. But I still had fun, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Obviously, if I come prepared, then that's a different story. But since I was unprepared, it's like, at least I got to play the game and have fun. But anyway, if you're going to play competitively, obviously you should be ready. And that's where memorizing your deck strategy, your cards and stuff like that, so that way you don't have to think that much while you're playing. You definitely don't want to be in a scenario where you have to read your cards, like you should already know them. And if you have to, like you're having trouble remembering the exact wording of your cards, then you should be able to just look at them real quick and just skim through it real quick and just look at it. It's like, okay, there's the key words that I need to see, to confirm how I can and can't use this card in a certain interaction, and then just go from there, right? So, but you should have basic idea of what your cards do, right? You should know how your Oceanus work, right? How your Flying Nimbus works, right? Stuff like that. And yes, there are some cards that have similar effects, so you gotta remember the subtle differences of your cards, you know. Because I have a, what is it called? I got a Super Saiyan 4 Goku Unison that floodgates, right? It makes it where my opponent has to send a 2-cost or higher battle card to the bottom of the deck for each attack when they attack with a battle card. But I have a Gohan now, it's Unleashed Shackled, Powered Shackled or something. Unleashed Powered Shackled, something like that. And he is similar to that effect, but he's the opposite. Instead of 2 or higher, it's 2 or less battle cards. Have to be bottom deck in order for him to attack with battle cards. So that's the subtle difference. Similar effect, just the subtle difference. So you gotta keep that in mind. So depending on the matchup, if you're going up against a deck that has a whole bunch of 1-drops, you rather use the Unison, right? If you're going up against a deck that has a whole bunch of, 2 costs and higher, like, a whole bunch of big 3, 4, 5 drops, 6 drops, right? Like Dark Broly or something like that, then you want to use the Gohan. So, like for example, against any deck, like I was gonna say, Vegex, like against Vegex, a lot of their battle cards are 3 costs and higher in that deck, so the Gohan will be better against that deck than the Unison. Don't get me wrong, Unison is good. Obviously, it has the ability to -2 and board wipe, your opponent, ignore and bear bounce all their battle cards back to their hand, which is useful. But it just depends, right? But the point is, same effect or similar effect, just slightly different conditions. So you just gotta, that's the only thing you gotta pay attention to. But other than that, do what you do. The other thing is, the Gohan essentially is a turn 4 play, while the Unison is more of a turn 5. Right? Technically, you could play the Gohan turn 3, but to get his effect, you're going to need 1 extra energy, so it's essentially more of a turn 4 play. So using him to get into the Unison is a good strategy, right? Play the Gohan, trigger his effect, then the next turn play the Unison, trigger his effects, and then that can help you get to turn 6. So, that type of stuff. So having that in mind, helps you when you're playing. That way you don't have to try to think like, oh, what should I do turn 4? What should I do turn 5? It's like, it should be Gohan and the Unison. And then turn 6, Vegeta, Super Warrior, right? So you can ramp up 4 energy. And then turns, right? And then turn 7, whatever you want. Turn into Tides or whatever, right? You should have enough energy that you can play something on the field, like maybe a blocker or something, and then turn into Tides, and then try to go for game. And if you don't win, that's okay. You should still have blockers and some type of defense to protect you on the clapback in case your opponent tries to, come back at you, and then give you another shot at going for game next turn with, your board. That kind of stuff. Again, it's all about planning. Like planning to, that's the thing, you need to plan to fail. So you gotta not only have a strategy to win, but also a strategy a backup. Like, what if my win con doesn't work? What if my opponent stops me from winning that turn? What do I have a backup plan? Do I have a way to survive, right? So I can get another turn, right? So you always want to keep your guard up, keep your defenses up. Sometimes you gotta wait until turn 8 to turn into Tides instead of turn 7, right? Or maybe you can ramp and play them sooner than later. But that's the thing, is like you gotta think that far ahead before you even play the game. That's the most important thing, is like be ahead of the game before you actually play, because you're really wasting your time trying to win. Because if you don't have a plan, you're not prepared before you play. You're relying on luck. You're relying that, well, hopefully, I play my cards right. Hopefully, not you definitely will play them right, as in you already know what you're going to play. Is you hope that you play the cards right. You hope you draw the cards in the right order. You play them at the right order, like you're hoping. And it's like, but all that you shouldn't be hoping, right? You should know that you're going to play all the cards right. You're going to get the outcomes you want. That's just by you playing. That has nothing to do with like your opponent reacting or interacting with you. It's just you're going to draw the cards, you're going to play the cards, and you're going to play out your strategy. And that's where doing test hands coming into play. The thing you should do the most is test hands, right? Just shuffle, draw your first hand, do the mulligan thing, charge your life, right? And then start playing out your hand, right? And just keep doing that over and over again. So muscle memory, and that will lead to you ultra instinct, right? So I'm literally telling you to practice developing real life ultra instinct so you can use it when you play. That way you're not thinking too much, because sometimes you'll end up wasting valuable time thinking, like, what should I charge? What should I play? Should I play this 3-drop or this 3-drop? You should already know which 3-drop you're going to play before you even play the game. But if there is a situation where you have to not play the obvious 3-drop, and you might have to consider playing the other 3-drop, then, well, the only time you should be taking is deciding, okay, based off of the situation, which one's the better choice. Because the obvious choice, in general, is the normal 3-drop you're supposed to play. Like, for me, it would be like Raditz Giant Force, right? Turn 3, play my Unison, my Raditz, so I can draw and have the ability to potentially block 2 attacks, plus I can attack with it. So that's my obvious turn 3 play. But if I have to play something different, if I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep my energy untapped, and I'm going to use my Gohan, Baby's Minion instead, and just floodgate my opponent. So instead of playing my Unison, I'll keep my energy up and play my Gohan instead. Next turn, I'll play my Unison and still have 1 energy up, right? So I have 1 energy up for like a negate, right? And have the Unison doing his thing, right? I might wait a turn for my Unison. So now I'm gonna use the other 3-drop. So like, that's the kind of mindset. That's the only type of difference. But if the situation is like, well, there's no need for me not to play my Unison right now, so I'll play it. But if the situation is like, yeah, I'm gonna need to wait a turn for my Unison, but I still need to make a play, I still gotta do something, right? I gotta deal with my opponent's board, so that's where the turn 3, that's where the Gohan will come into play. So it's like, all right, Gohan, then Unison, instead of the other way around. So, and sometimes it could be the other way around. Sometimes it's like, yep, I'll play the Unison now and save the Gohan for next turn. Because the idea is to go from turn 4 to turn 5, so I use Gohan to floodgate myself into turn 5, right? So, again, simple stuff. And this is the kind of stuff I think about even before I use the cards and shuffle and play the game against an actual opponent. I'm already thinking this stuff. I'm already planning this stuff. So that way when I play, I'm not thinking like, okay, what should I do? I already know what I'm going to do, right? Or I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm just doing, right? I'm not thinking, I'm just doing, right? Don't think, do. Like Yoda be saying, don't think about doing something, just do it, right? Autonomous action, ultra instinct. So what else? But like I was saying earlier, you don't want to be in a situation where you're overthinking. You don't want to be nervous. You want to be relaxed. You definitely want to enjoy the game. You want to be able to, see what your opponent's doing and be able to interact with them. Especially if you have like counter plays and stuff like that. Very important to pay attention to them. because their plays determines your plays, right? They play something, you counter it, right? So their plays determine your plays, so you got to focus on what they're doing more than what you're doing. And again, like I said, the whole cheating thing, it helps to help you avoid preventing somebody from cheating if you can actually pay attention to what they're doing. Even on your turn, when you're making your plays, you should still be able to see your opponent through your peripherals, right? The corner of your eye, you should still be able to see them. Make sure they're not grabbing an extra card, making sure their hand's not moving under the table or something of that nature, especially if your webcam. That's the thing. I mean, I gotta make a whole entire video about that, about webcam, because that's a different beast, as they say. That's a different beast mode, right? Different beast when it comes to playing card games. I'm definitely a fan of being able to play the game online. It's just it's not being done right, which means I have to do it the right way, because people are definitely not doing it right. Anyway, like I said, I'll make a video about it. But let's see. I don't want to just keep blabbing on. Trying to see if there's anything else. Combo math, right? There you go. Combo math. Yeah. Like when it comes to your opponent's hand size, it's important to keep track of their hand size, right? That's because after turn 3, your opponent's hand size is going to be a problem. Turn 1, turn 2 is not that big of a deal. You could just attack and not worry about combo, about combo math, right? You don't have to worry too much about your opponent trying to stop your attacks the first 2 turns of the game. It's turn 3 and above where it gets harder to deal damage, because your opponent's going to be on the defense. Especially if you already dealt them a lot of damage, they're going to be on the defense, turn 3 and above. So mid-game to late game is when they're going to be more defensive. So then that's where keeping track of their hand is important. Keeping track of how many super combos they already used. Ideally, you want to make them use their super combo early. And if you use super combos, obviously save your super combos for late game. So that's basic Dragon Ball Super 101 right there. And like I said, keep track of the numbers of cards in the hand, so that way you can determine the possibility of how much they could out-combo your attack. Ideally, you want them to be tapped out when you're trying to go for game. So that's why it's important to do the math. You don't want to guess. So this is doing combo math is more of like more of an educated guess. There's a higher mathematical probability of you guessing right that they can't out-combo your attacks, or your attacks will go through if you do combo math, right? Then if you were to just hope that your attack goes through, you're like, I'll attack and hopefully my attacks will go through, right? Because sometimes doing the combo math helps determine if you should combo or not. Because typically I prefer not to combo. I'd rather force my opponent to combo. So obviously I made videos about that, where you combo defensively, never offensively, but you want your opponent to, to do both, right? To combo offensively and defensively, because you're trying to reduce their hand size. You always want to keep their hand size 6 cards or less. So there's that. So again, that's why you pay attention, so that way you can hopefully force them, because you're really trying to control their hand. So you got to keep an eye on their hand, try to control their hand, look at their energies, so that way you know what's in their hand. So that's another thing. Their energy can give you an idea of how much combo power they have in their hand, because like I always say, their energy area is the mirror of their hand. Because the general rule that most of us follow when we play the game is we always charge an extra copy of a card that's in our hand. Not necessarily an extra copy of a card we have in our deck, more so of what we have in our hand. So if we have 2 copies of a card in our hand, we charge 1, right? Which automatically snitches you out, right? Already tells your opponent, oh, he has another Turn of Tides in his hand because he just charged Turn of Tides. He wouldn't charge it if he didn't have an extra one in his hand, right? Now, is there a chance, maybe a small, like 5% chance, that he did charge the only Turn of Tides in his hand? That is possible. Maybe he had no other options. But on the mathematically, 9 out of 10 times, if he charges Turning of the Tides, that means he has an extra one. If he charges any good card, he more likely has an extra copy. Just saying. If you don't know, now you know, and knowing is half the battle, right? Or at least knowing is half you winning, right? I think that's enough, little tips. Hopefully y'all watch my master classes. Lots of good information there, more in-depth of what I just mentioned here. And hopefully y'all understand the idea of hold instinct, where you win the game before you even start, not after you start, right? You win the game before you start. You already know how to win before you win. You already know how to get 16 energy. You're going to tap all 16 and win, as an example. And that's the end of the video. Podcast.